Billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers, welcome to the show. Think about it. Today's topic and what we would like to discuss is something that's quite critical and important to discuss at this time. Definitely it should be something that everybody talks about and understands, but unfortunately it takes a situation, an event, or some kind of an incident to happen for people to reflect. Today we're going to be talking about stereotyping. What is stereotyping? Stereotyping is a fixed or generalized belief. Now this belief doesn't have to be true, but it is one that people entail or have about a certain person or a group of people. Yes, it can be about a certain person as well. You can stereotype someone. How do you stereotype someone? If you have a child that's growing up and they have certain mannerisms or habits that they hold, and then you don't see them for a long time, you see them after 10, 15, or 20 years, and you judge them based on how they were when they were a child, based on the past. Now 10 to 15 or 20 years is a long gap, but even a week to 2 weeks to a month to a year is enough time for anybody to change the way they are, or the way they think, or their belief, or their mannerisms. But yet we do decide to stereotype. And we stereotype on what the majority elements are, is race, where you're from, your nationality, your religion. And if you go even further into it, we also stereotype based on family. That means caste or tribe. So stereotyping is something that's available through not only every facet of life, but through every single point. Stereotyping has been used in almost any subject, any matter, which is quite shocking. Now, of course, a lot of people say that they're positive stereotyping as well. So, for example, a certain group of people or nationality is known to be very good with numbers, or very good at memory, or very good at being a tradesman or athletic. Even if it's positive, you have generalized a group of people. You've generalized a gender, a nationality, a color. And what you have done is you haven't given them room to actually prove anything. So stereotypes is basically labeling somebody or someone or a group of people without even letting yourself the chance to get to know them. We're impacted by stereotyping from the moment we're children, in adolescence, even prior to that, when you're infants. Stereotyping is something that can be found in every home as well, unfortunately. Now, this is what recent statistics and research state. Now, what we would like you to do is, of course, think about it. But look at this scenario. You're at home, you're watching television, and a certain scene comes on with a certain person, a certain people, with certain nationalities or ideas or beliefs or anything at all. And you're about to pass a comment. And it might be derogatory, condescending, and just pure negative. Now imagine, when you're about to pass that comment, if there's any child within the vicinity to listen to you and be able to hear you, you've just given them a lesson. So whatever you say that is negative about a certain person or a certain people, that child will take on that lesson and present it, believe it, and use it and implement it in their lives. When they go to school, if there's a certain person in their class who is classified under the very comment you made, that child will either refrain from becoming friends with this boy or girl, or will end up having a conflict with them based on your comment. We say children learn very fast and they have minds like sponges. It's all true. But what are we doing to nurture that sponge? What are we doing to nurture that mind and move forward? Stereotyping has segregated people. It has segregated societies, it has segregated companies, it has segregated people in the corporate world, in the education world, and even in childhood. And it's something that is definitely quite shocking. Now, of course, saying racism sounds a bit more offensive and powerful. Saying stereotyping doesn't have the same magnitude. But where does it fit in? Let's go back to where it all began. Now, to pinpoint where stereotyping started is not an easy task. Because stereotyping existed even before the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It existed from the time of all the different prophets that have passed. What was stereotyping? So there would be a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somebody with a message from God, somebody who was chosen from God to go and educate people, to take them away from ignorance. And that person would be told to the entire community as somebody who's misleading you, misguiding you, throwing his own principles around, and some form of condescending manner. And then whoever would follow that person would also be caught into that bubble. And that is what stereotyping is. You've generalized something without understanding it completely. If you say that this household is very good because the father is a good man, it doesn't necessarily mean the children are. Inshallah, we do pray that the children are, because they have a good person to follow and to guide them. But not everybody is the same. And what we do is we indulge in stereotyping, we indulge in generalizing. And when we do this, we end up hurting ourselves. How do we hurt ourselves? We might close opportunities for our own benefit, and we're not expanding our mind, we're not thinking anymore. We're succumbing to a certain something that somebody said, that somebody labeled, that somebody knew. And that person who knew got it off of one person. Or maybe made a false statement. But today it's indoctrined into your mind. Now we can't pinpoint when stereotyping began, but we can pinpoint when this phenomena was standardized and developed. Let's go all the way back to medieval Europe, just as we did in the last show. Now, I throw a lot of heat on medieval Europe, but it was definitely the trend-setting area of that time. Nowadays, when you go to different parts of the world and you see Americanized people or North American products or something, we're in a global village today, and we follow certain trends set off by certain people. And we follow different industries, whether it be Hollywood or Bollywood or whatever kind of facet that we like to follow or that we develop an interest with. At that time, it was medieval Europe. What happened was that there were elite people, ruling class. What they did was, when they became a part of the ruling class, they understood that if they were to make a mistake or if they were to take more benefits than that was fair, and they would abuse the power that they would have, people would question them. People would rally against them. There would be protests and they won't be able to stay in their position. And we've seen ample amount of examples within Europe where dynasties, monarchies have fallen because of injustice and because of being unfair. So what the elite class did was they approached middlemen. They approached people who were of the middle class and lower class, labor class, or whatever people want to say, or whatever label you want to put on them. And they started pinning each other against one other group. So you'd have an elite person who would talk to a certain idea of people, people who hold a certain belief or look a certain way, have a certain skin tone, and would put them against somebody with a different skin tone, idea, or belief. And what would happen is then these people would start arguing and fighting and conflicting between each other instead of highlighting and focusing on the elite or the ruling party. And that is a strategy used even today, modern day time. You might look at a country as a superpower, which might have ample amount of issues, which has rallies happening, which has unfairity to the highest extent and injustice taking place. Granted, it might be something that's highlighted more than the positive aspect of it, but it does contain a certain amount of area of improvement. It needs to improve and develop itself as well. But the entire world has been put on and pit against each other. So you never look that way or question it to that extent. And so that's where it began. Stereotyping is basically a polite way. I'm not sure it is polite, but it was conformed to be a polite way to become racism. What is racism exactly? Racism is when you hold a certain belief or a fixed mind, a fixed thought towards a certain person, a certain race, a certain religion, and a certain group of people. That's exactly what stereotyping is. The only thing that stereotyping has is there's a positive aspect to it. But sometimes positivity is not positivity. It cancels itself out. If you would say that these people are very good with numbers and you find somebody who isn't from those people and that person isn't good with numbers, all of a sudden the image falls. What we've done is we've let go of understanding each other, researching, being open. We've created barriers and fixed images of people, and we use them in everyday practice. Some current examples that I would like to mention today, prior to moving on, is that take a look at the world today. There is a lot of heat and a lot of emphasis and a rise of patriotism and nationalism. What is nationalism? Nationalism is to be proud of or be patriotic towards where you come from. It could be a city, it could be a town, a neighborhood, a country, a continent, it could be anything. Now this rise of nationalism, what it's done is that it's caused the entire world to shake, break apart, create further barriers and issues. Today, somebody who wants to go and have a good life because wherever they live, they're not able to sustain themselves and they want to move somewhere else, it doesn't mean that this person has issues as such with skills. This person could be highly skilled, and they move to another country where his skill or her skill would be acknowledged, and they would have opportunity to grow. And when they do that, because of stereotypes and because of certain barriers that have been put up, that person has to face difficulty just to prove themselves into the system. We have some countries, thankfully, in this world whose leadership talks about equality, whose leadership talks about breaking away from stereotypes. Now, I live in Canada, and I'm a permanent resident. I'm very proud of the fact that my Prime Minister took a knee when injustice took place. When you have leadership that tells you about equality, when you have somebody to guide you, that shows you what it's like to be humble and modest, that is something you can take away from. But the current examples of certain stereotyping, or the modern day word for racism, can be seen in election campaigns today. Make my country great again. We want to get our country back. We want to do this and that. Who do you want to get your country back from to begin with? This entire globe, at least half of it, was colonized. That means regardless of what country you come from some way or forth, you're a mixed person. I'm a mixed person. And I know mixed is known to be something that might be derogatory with some people, but I don't know any other word to put an educated terminology on it. We're all human beings at the end of the day. If I cut and my blood is green and yours is red, yes, that's a difference. But if that doesn't happen and we bleed the same, dear viewers, there is no difference between you and I. But what we've done is election campaigns happen, and they happen to tell people that we're going to support this sect of society, we're going to support these people, we're going to make our country great again. Great again from who? North America is where we live right now. This entire continent was built on immigrants. And believe it or not, people who come and get opportunity are the people who are the most thankful, most hardworking, and people who are ready to face any challenge. And it doesn't mean that they're not proud of where they came from. They're very proud of where they came from. The only thing they wanted was self-development. They wanted to have a better future. And maybe at that phase or fact and time in life, their country didn't open up those opportunities. That subject had no scope in it. Being a doctor in some country might not have had a scope. Being an engineer or a telecom engineer might not have had that scope or that much scope, whereas another country was offering you something entirely different. We can see it in immigration issues. Now, when I talk about immigration issues, stereotyping, what we do is that we, in fact, label people and put them into categories based on the way they speak. Dear viewers, I'm an immigrant. I immigrated to this country. I immigrated to Canada. My parents did and I did. I wasn't a born Canadian. A lot of the times when people talk to me, they can't believe it. That's because of one little thing. It's the way I speak, right? A lot of people who come here who are educated or have that talent, to that knack or that nick or that skill to pick up an accent or something and to use it every single day and make it their own. What happens is when immigration issues take place, it's because of people who don't look like you and don't sound like you. Nobody has an issue with immigrants who sound like you and look like you. Everyone has an issue with immigrants who don't sound like you and who don't look like you. When somebody speaks a certain language that is not theirs because they've immigrated to that country, because of their accent, you judge whether they're intelligent or not. Even though accent has no measure on intelligence. An accent is basically just the way a person can communicate to you. If somebody speaks to me in my language, but with the rules of his own or her own, that does not measure intelligence. That's somebody who's striving, trying, and could be equally intelligent, if not more. And then we come to culture and lobbying. Culture and lobbying is the biggest issue that we faced. You have a child at home. You made a condescending remark. This child has indoctrinated, goes to school, and makes friends or has conflicts based on what you've said, based on the lesson you gave that child. Then this child grows up and goes to university. Maybe some teachers or some people around feel a certain way about this child because of the certain background that he has or she has. And they start facing issues. And then when they come onto physical level to work after they've gotten their degrees and they want to go forward in life, what ends up happening is that when you go to work, you end up finding lobbies. There's a lobby of certain nationals, that's a lobby of certain nationals, and these people hire people from their own nationality or their own culture. And it's ridiculous. So you're not actually looking at a talent or a skill or experience or somebody who has a bright mind. You're judging them and labeling them based on something that is arbitrary, man-made, something that doesn't even exist. And that is a sad reality. And that is something that we need to fix. Before I actually give out some suggestions on how to fix, I'm sure a lot of people know this problem. And a lot of people have spoken about this as well. I'm sure that in the future, things will become better. I hope and I pray. And as Muslim people around the world, we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us rid of this ignorance that we have and this foolishness that we indulge ourselves in. But lobbies, cultural lobbies, do exist. In fact, so much so that even if you have one country, it's one nation, you all hold a similar passport, a similar culture. But some countries have different languages that are spoken within that country. They have different provinces, different areas, different states. And they go up against each other based on that. They've stereotyped where you're from, what province you come from, so you must be like this, you must be like that. And it is absolutely ridiculous. I remember quite clearly about 2 years ago, I went for a vacation to Europe. Now, usually I share stories of other people. Today I want to start off with my own story. And I was in Italy. And I was with my family. I enjoyed Italy. It was a beautiful place, cobblestone walkways, the weather was very nice, friendly people, friendly people. And when I tried to speak Italian with them, they appreciated that so much so that they went the extra mile as well. Now, I don't know if it was because how I looked or whether they were just friendly people. But based on what I can see, I have no preemptive notion to call them that these are all friendly people or great people or just because of the way I look. I came across some really wonderful people who were open. So for me, they are wonderful people. But one can change from another. All of our fingers are different, aren't they? One is big, one is small, one looks like a thumb. When we have all these different sizes and all these different shapes, that's exactly how life is. You can't put one book or one cover to cover it all up and generalize. So I ran into a taxi driver who was taking me back to the airport. It was my last day in Italy. And the gentleman had never met anybody from my background. I'm originally from Pakistan. He'd never met a Pakistani before. So I talked to him about Pakistan, and he Googled it on his phone. And when he Googled it, he found a lot of different items and things to look at. And then I asked him to look at textile and positive things. Just write down positive Pakistan or something like that. And he was shocked that FIFA, the world tournament that happens for football, the balls made come from a city called Sialkot in Pakistan, which is also my city, by the way. This person was shocked. And he said, my whole mind has just changed. Now, it's not his fault. It wasn't the person's fault. It's just that you either don't have that much exposure, not that much education maybe, you haven't researched it enough, you haven't used logic into the situation, you used a premeditated label, which we call stereotyping, which in fact is racism. Whether it be good or bad, you can't put a generalized label on a group of people, or even a single person, judging them on their past or judging them how they are. So within the same country, you have racial profiling. Within different countries, when you go, you get to learn different things. And you get to see how people look at you. You might get a time or an opportunity to educate people, which might be very good. And hats off to those people who are able to do so. But then you have another spectrum of looking at it. When a child is told in their upbringing that you will face barriers in life because the government or the system or whoever it is, the man, will not have your back because of your certain ethnic background or the way you look. And that child is fed this from the time until they're children, until they grow up. That child who has now become a man or a woman is looking for an excuse to go against the system because they've been told this, they've been fed this. The likes of different rappers and different music artists who talk about system and who form a rebellion, or how media covers them as somebody who's a threat or dangerous music. These people grew up in a society where it wasn't just their parents who told them that they would have a problem. They saw the system, and the system did in fact have indiscrepancies. They did face issues, so they rose against it. Now, you might label that good or bad, or you might look at it, they were doing what they believed in and what they were taught. Let's look at the other picture. If a child is told that they're chosen by God, or if they're told that they're special, or if they're told that they are of that sect of life or that category of people where the world is open for you and you can do whatever you want, and condescending remarks are set against the other faction or the other group of people, then this person is going to grow up to be arrogant, ignorant, and what we would call today as somebody who is a racist. It could go on both spectrums, but then we use stereotypes. So this person would grow up and would actually, whenever they get an opportunity, might actually do injustice to somebody from another group just because they feel like they can. And then you have people in the middle. People who learn, people who are educated, people who are out there trying to educate others, enlighten other people, understand what is wrong, get to the bottom of it. But injustice, because of stereotyping or racial profiling, is inconceivable, ridiculous, absolutely. Today, I'd also like to mention a very unfortunate story, the one that has taken the news, the one that has caused the US to have a lot of rallies in it, and even Canada, people have come out and protest. George Floyd. I don't know his background. I don't know how the person was. I've gone online and I've tried to search up how he was and how his life was. I'm nobody to judge. But whoever it was that did that injustice to him was a person who might have been from that household that was told that they can do anything and get by. And George Floyd was a victim of hate, illiteracy, ignorance, arrogance, and I apologize for my words, but stupidity. This has got to stop. We throw each other under the bus too often. We generalize too often. We create barriers against each other too often. Now, out of research, I can tell you this. Being an educator myself, I've been in education for about 9 to 10 years now. Being an educator, doing research for universities, working at universities, studying at universities, talking to professors, looking at contemporary sciences and research, I have seen, and I can tell you, that research states, and this is something that's true, that racism or stereotyping or hatred is not something that comes from within. It's something that is taught. When you're born, there was a research done with 11-month-old babies. They were all taken and put into a playpen. Babies from Asia, from Africa, from Europe, from North America, South America, different continents, different backgrounds, different nationalities. 11-month-old babies who can't even talk yet. And they were put into a playpen to play together, and they were given some toys. There was no bit of hatred between them. There was no bit of fighting going on between them. They played and enjoyed. But when you took 15-year-old boys and girls and you put them in a room together to play with each other, there was an issue. Where someone either thought they were better than another person, or someone had a complex issue, someone had a precautionary thing, conflicts took place, because of one thing that university research stated. They were indoctrinated and given a value of stereotyping. They were told who was better, who was worse, or whatever the case was. So we've in fact given children this gift of hatred, of comparison, of being able to think that you're better than someone, or being able to think that someone else is better than you. When subhanAllah, your beautiful religion of Islam tells you that there's no difference between one man to another, regardless of what your background is, regardless of what language you speak, regardless of what beliefs you have. Well, of course, beliefs is one aspect that is important. But regardless of all these other issues, you're equal in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're equal in the eyes of God. What we've done is, as human beings, we've indoctrinated different beliefs and we've caused them to dictate us and move forward. There's a story that I recently found out, and I'm going to share two more stories with you. The story is of a very noble and educated scholar of Islam. He was African American, he was from America. And the story of him is that he was sitting with his father one day in the car, and they were driving from one part of town to maybe another town or another city. I'm not sure what the reason was. It could have been a wedding, could have been a ceremony, but whatever the reason. When they were traveling, the child saw a group of people, today known as white or Caucasian, a label that people use, walk into a church, a big building with a very big minar, as we would say. And this child, today a scholar, at that time he was probably 7 or 8 years old, looks at his father and asks him, who are these people and where are they going? And his father said that, these are the people from the white church. They're going to church. So he looked at his father and he said that, what do you mean white people? And his father said, all of them are white people and they're allowed in this church. So he looked at his father and he said, that means I'm not allowed to go into this church? And his father said, no son, we have our own. They kept driving, and maybe a few miles later the father spotted a place where African Americans, black people, were going to a church. And he looked at his son, he's like, see son, that is what belongs to us. That's where we go. And he looked at his father and he looked at the church and he was quiet. A few miles rolled down, maybe they were about to reach their destination, and this young boy took a look at a group of people. Asians, Americans, white, black, Caucasians, all these different types of people from different backgrounds going into a building. And he looked at his dad, he's like, Dad, who are they? And his dad said, and his dad looked and he saw somebody wearing a hat for prayer, somebody was wearing like a thobe, somebody was wearing a shalwar and kameez. And he was like, oh, son, those are Muslims. He's like, where are they going? And his father said, they're going to go pray. Like, they don't have a difference? Everybody can pray together? He's like, yeah, son, that's Islam. And this 8-year-old boy, 7 or 8-year-old boy, looked at his father and said, I'm one of them. Look at the power and the magnitude of that message. That child, when you're born, when you're growing up, but before you create awareness, you use logic. When you get awareness, you try to put 1 and 1 together, 2 and 2 together. You try to match up everything. And then values or ideas and opinions are indoctrinated into your mind because of your household or your community. And then you grow up to have a fixed mindset. Not everybody, but quite a few people. This child looked at equality and said that I'm a part of equality. Because that is what we're born with. We're not born with hatred. The only thing that we're born with is logic. What we're born with is the ability to understand something, appreciate something, look at the differences and be mesmerized by it. And our religion tells us that we created you into different tribes and castes so you can recognize one another. Not despise one another, recognize one another. But we've taken another turn to it. And then there's a story that I just found out this morning, in fact. In school, when there was religion classes going on, there was an Islamic education class where a story was shared about a young girl who goes to school and she makes a friend. She comes home and she tells her mother all about this friend that she's made and how amazing this friend is, how great this friend is, and how, lovely it is to hang out with her, how funny she is, and how many things she has in common with her. And the mother says, okay. And then the mother one day goes to school as well, drop off her daughter. She sees the classroom. And then when that day finished and the girl came home and she was about to tell the new stories that she had had with her new friend, the mother said, I don't want you hanging out with that friend anymore. Hang out with that girl. There was another girl, a third girl. And the daughter looks at her mother and says, but I don't have anything in common with that girl. I don't really know her. And I like my friend. My friend's nice. We hang out, we have a lot of things in common, we enjoy. And the mother still insisted. And in fact, the mother came up with a very bad phrase or sentence. Said, no, that friend is not good. go to the other friend. Not good. And then a parent-teacher meeting happened. A lot of people came together. There was a gathering which was followed by a school barbecue. And that small girl who was confused why her friend was not good looked at her mother and saw her mother talking to the mother of that third girl. And then she realized that because my mother can speak the same language as this girl's mother, that's why she wanted me to be friends. And she went and she asked and she approached. And the mother was like, yes, that's why I wanted you to be friends with this person. So what we've done is, this girl has just received a lesson 101 in stereotyping. It's not putting a label on somebody. Of course, not good is a label. But it has given her something at a very young age that is full of hatred. That can later on in the future become hatred. And that is sad, sick, and absolutely ridiculous. Now, dear viewers, I've talked about racism in terms of it becoming stereotyping. Because stereotyping is indeed a modern way for the terminology of racism. We need to shed away from it. We need to rid ourselves from stereotyping. We need to understand every single person that we meet. Because the one thing you can do to fix this issue, number one, you have to cleanse yourself. And when I say cleanse yourself, it means rid yourselves of all these preemptive notions, opinions, and thoughts that you have about a certain sect of people or a group of people or a person. My advice, if you would like to follow it, would be research, Google, good things about a certain nation or a certain background or certain people. And we see all the positive things that they have, think about how they benefit society. Every show that I've come on to, I've asked and I've prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I've asked our viewers to pray as well, that, Ya Allah, let us be a benefit to society. A benefit to society means that we gain good deeds, we gain ajr, and we become better versions of ourselves. Indeed, we all have some form of vice or some form of bad habit or some mannerism that people do not enjoy. Maybe the way I come off might be too frank. Maybe the way some people speak or react isn't liked by another group. But at the end of the day, we have to pray and we have to work hard to become better versions of ourselves. Research good things about a nation, about how the positivity increases. And if they're going through a difficult time or they have areas which need to be improved, pray that they get improved. Pray that God gives them the ability, the leadership, the ability, the people, the ability to make that nation stronger and better. And the second thing that you could do is every time you have an opinion or a comment that's about to come out of your mouth, which might be condescending or negative, because it might happen. Sometimes we don't have control over what we say. Make sure your children or any young person in the room does not witness or hear what you say. Because the moment you say something, it's indoctrined. That means it's fixed in their mind. They take that and measure people according to what you've said. That is how you save the future. You save the future by making them focus on positive things and how to improve this world and how to be a benefit to society. How to become great people. How to go into whatever field that they choose or they find interesting and reach the pinnacle of it. You don't create issues or show them negativity within the world. Because negativity does not exist within the human being. It is taught. Hatred is taught. And for those people who do have a good amount of finances and money, my advice to you would be to travel. You can never waste your money on traveling and looking at the world, because you really find out how insignificant you are. You really find out that you're just a human being, so is everybody else. And you actually get to appreciate different cultures, different backgrounds, different mindsets, different perspectives on thinking. We know that different perspectives exist, but we label them. But what about a household which has a son or a daughter who's an engineer, another who's a businessman or woman, another who's an educator, someone who's in the medical field? All of them have different ways to approach an issue because they have a different mindset, they have a different perception. All of them are very much valuable where they are. But you can't rid one off or say, oh, stereotypical, this person's going to talk about this or this person's going to talk about that, and it's not going to make sense. The advice is that all of us go out. And when we go out, I mean go out of stereotyping, go out of racial profiling. We need to stand together by each other, support each other. And that is what will make any country, any nation great. That is the key. It's not profiling and coming up with communities or patches or groups and then running with them. No. It's taking everybody together, building a format and platform for everybody. It's about supporting one another. It's about understanding each other. When you meet somebody for the first time in your life, a stranger, the first thing you do is you give off respect to them. Whether it be in any language. Some languages have certain words which are for respect. If you use Urdu or Arabic or Turkish or another language, Russian even, you have certain ways of talking to people, certain words which have more respect in them, and certain which are a bit more neutral. The first time you meet somebody, you automatically give off respect to the person before you know them. If they do become friends with you, you become extremely informal with them, it might go on to friendship or something else. If you have a conflict with them, of course, it's going to deteriorate and become negative. But just think about it. The first time you meet somebody, you meet them with respect. That means it is innate. It is within our nature. It is something that God has given us, that we give off respect the first time we meet somebody. But it is what this world has taught us that makes us profile, segregate, and stereotype. The last thing that I could tell you before I bid you all adieu is that we all need to go and be a benefit to community and society. Go and do volunteer work of any kind. In fact, this show itself is streamed on Facebook. Different facets and channels of media are available. IPTV. It might also be uploaded on YouTube. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe and do everything, but then give us feedback as well. I'm a person who comes on here as an educator, and I want to make sure that I talk about a topic where someone can take something away from it. We want your feedback. We want to know what you're doing for the community so we can highlight it and praise what we're doing and make our community, our society better. I want to thank all you dear viewers for tuning in today. Jazakallahu khairan. Until next week, I'll see you again. Think about it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.